There's lots of info out there on the best corals for beginners to buy, but in this video, you're going to learn about 3 corals that beginners should totally avoid when first getting into the saltwater aquarium hobby. Hi, I'm George, and in this coral fish video, I'm going to be telling all you beginners out there what to avoid when buying coral. Here are the 3 types you should avoid. Number 1, potentially invasive corals like green star polyps, Xenia, Anthelia, yellow polyps, and generic brown/green pallies. Now you're probably like, George, what happened to 3? I wanted to start with this list of corals because they can be both good and bad corals for beginners to buy. Here's why. These corals are extremely hardy, very fast growing, and usually very cheap to buy, which is why they can be great corals for beginners setting up their first saltwater tank. However, usually these corals are so hardy, so fast growing, and so cheap that before you know it, your tank will be covered in them and you're never really going to be able to get back the real estate of the rocks that you initially put these corals on. They're also going to take out and grow over your more prized corals that you place them next to. Now, some people hate corals like green star polyps and Xenia, but personally, I love them. In fact, I like all of the corals that I mentioned as potentially invasive corals. They're beautifully colored, they add sweet movement to the tank, and they'll usually get beginners to fall in love with the hobby and get really addicted. But you need to isolate them and put them on their own rock or in the sand bed, some kind of island, some way so that they can't spread. I'm putting them on this list only because so many people say you should totally avoid these kinds of corals altogether. However, I encourage you to get corals like this. Just make sure that you're ready to control them and you keep an eye on them. Number 2, the Goniopora, otherwise known as the flower pot coral. This coral has a terrible reputation in the aquarium industry, and it's because it usually doesn't live past a year, even under the care of experts. It's extremely beautiful and very tempting to buy, which is why it's a very common rookie's mistake to buy one and have it die within a week. Some people have recently had better success propagating them, but this is only with certain species and colors that are usually aquaculture. They're still a moderately difficult coral to care for and require intensive research and feeding, which is why if you're new to the saltwater aquarium hobby, I highly suggest you resist the urge to take on the challenge that many call the flower pot coral. And finally, number 3, any non-photosynthetic corals. These include sea fans, gorgonians, chili corals, and sun corals. Because these corals cannot create energy from the lights in your aquarium, they must be fed 3 times a day. With all of this feeding, a really good filtration system needs to be in place to keep your water parameters in check. These kinds of corals require special attention and tedious work, which is why if you're a beginner in the aquarium hobby, I would totally avoid these kinds of corals. Now here are a couple extra tips to remember when buying coral. There's soft coral, LPS coral, SPS coral, and then the ones I just mentioned, the NPS coral. And most people will agree that they rank in this order from easiest to hardest to care for. I highly suggest to any beginners to start with some easy and basic soft corals and to work your way up. There are some good LPS corals for beginners, but I highly advise against any beginners to jump right into SPS corals like acros because they require very special and pristine water parameters. And remember just to research any coral before you buy it. It only takes 2 minutes to pull out your smartphone and double check your aquarium store's advice. I hope this video gave all of you beginners out there a real heads up on these 3 kinds of coral. I really am interested to know if you've had any experiences with them. I would love to hear them in the comment section below. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already for more videos like this one, and check out these other 2 videos for those of you who are trying to set up your first saltwater tank. Remember to keep those nitrates low. George,